I really like the idea not of work-life balance, which I think is kind of a trap, but work-life harmony or work-life integration. The idea being like, how do we make these two things fit together in a really nice, harmonious way?
What does it look like for organizations that offer a supportive environment when it comes to mental health versus those that don't?
You probably know it because you feel like you can say, hey, I'm struggling. So there's less of a stigma. But if you're not safe to say, hey, I don't feel like myself today, hey, I'm not able to concentrate, I can't focus, that's probably a good indication that the culture isn't as healthy as it could be. If I'm at work and I'm feeling really guilty that I'm not with my son, and then I'm with my son, but when I'm with him, I'm distracted on Slacks and work stuff, like, you're nowhere. But if I'm at work and I'm really intentional about it, and I'm doing great work and I'm doing that, and then when I'm with my son, I'm really with him and I'm spending time, like, that feels good to me, that feels aligned.
My very special guest is the founder and CEO of Journey, the leading proactive mental health solution for modern companies. Journey was founded with the mission to help all people live happier, healthier, less stressed lives. They work with a wide range of organizations, including the likes of New Balance, Lululemon, Georgetown University, and many more. He is Stephen Sokoler. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Now, a lot of people don't know this, of course, but you and I first met in Vegas, of all things. And why were we in Vegas? We were there for the Transform conference, but had a lovely chat there at the show. I hope it was a good show for you. And I don't know. I don't make it to Vegas all that often myself, but
yeah,
it was great seeing you there.
Yeah, I love Vegas. I love Vegas less for conferences because honestly, like, there's so much happening all at the same time, and you can't really go deep with somebody before they're getting called away or you're getting called away. You know, I prefer like the smaller shows, but Vegas is a hoot. My wife and I, during the pandemic, we eloped in Vegas after planning a bunch of weddings that got canceled. We said, you know what, we're just doing it, the two of us, and we did it. So it's a place that has some special memories for me.
Look at that. Certainly it is. That's awesome. I love that. Well, I got introduced to your book there, and that's what I'd love to talk to you about today. And I'll get us started with this. It's all about mental health. And when people think about the topic of mental health, I know for a long time I did as well, we usually think about it as mental health. That's something we've got to move away from those challenges. We want to stay away from the problems, the negative aspects of when we don't have mental health or a certain level of mental awareness. But in the book, you talk about how the proper definition of it kind of goes further than that. So how do you think about mental health, or how can we think about it more comprehensively than just avoiding the bad stuff?
Yeah, well, I think when we think about mental health, when we talk about mental health, we tend to be talking about mental illness, right? It's like something's wrong with my mental health versus, you know, the way you think about physical health, where you'd say, oh, you know, I'm feeling really good, I'm feeling energized, I'm feeling fit, or I'm feeling out of shape, or I'm, you know, something else, right? I'm struggling with something. And so I'm happy to see that there's a lot of organizations, for-profits, not-for-profits, individuals speaking out about the importance of mental health as a overall part of our well-being. In other words, mental health is health, not mental health is, oh, I now have an issue. I'm struggling with anxiety or depression or something even more significant. So I think we societally are doing a good job, starting to do a good job of reshaping that conversation a little bit.
I think the health generally, you bring up such a great point. I hadn't really thought about it. And we know it's holistic. We know we have physical health, mental health, financial health, spiritual health, whatever, relationship health. And anytime we're talking about health, a lot of times the parts that are not up to average, we'll call it. And I know the history of psychology has always been, how do we get people to a level of being average and not in pain? Like, that's it. So very happy to see that we moved into a positive psychology movement, for example, to say, how do we look at functioning and flourishing and all the good stuff too? So you're bringing us to say, like, okay, certainly if there's a mental illness, you know, we want to make sure that we treat for that, but that's not the sum total of where it stops.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And the positive psychology movement is one that's exciting to see as well, right? The fact that people are thinking about what allows us to flourish, not simply, oh, we have this disease that we're now treating or reacting to.
100%. And something else that's kind of related to this is there's also this dimension, and you talk about we have to move from this reactive approach to one that's proactive. That's really central to your practice and certainly shows up in the book. But what does that look like in practice to go from, well, maybe give us a kind of a compare and contrast. Can you tell me a little bit about what reactive approach to mental health might look like and how the proactive one works and why it's better?
Sure. Yeah. Reactive is, oh, I have a problem. Excuse me. Oh, I've been depressed for the last 2 months, and now I'm going to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Oh, you know, I've been struggling with anxiety, and now I'm going to deal with that, right? And that can happen, and better to deal with it than not deal with it. But the proactive approach is, I'm doing things preventively. I'm doing things now, even though I feel totally fine, so that I don't have those issues, so that I'm more resilient. Now, of course, mental health, part of it is what we do, what happens to us. Part of it is genetic. So it's not simply the case that if we, do preventive things, then that would mean, similar to physical health, right? We all know that some people are more prone to getting certain types of diseases based on their genetics. That is a thing. And we tend to know that if we're eating well, if we're sleeping well, if we're going to the gym, if we're doing those types of things, that will, in general, be more helpful for us than not, right? Than eating poorly, not sleeping, not having any movement. It's the same with mental health, right? We as a society don't really talk about that yet, but the idea of if I have a daily meditation practice, if I have a journaling practice, if I have some other type of contemplation practice, whether that's prayer or being in nature, or, there's a whole host of things that are really, really good for our mental health. There's a whole host of things that are not so good for our mental health, right? And so the more we can be proactive and build that into our day to day, the better we'll show up for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for our companies, et cetera.
It makes total sense that it's almost like once it's too late, it's too late. At that point, we haven't done the preventive things or the proactive things as you describe it. And it's not that we need to wait until, oh man, I really need to take a day off. Well, okay. I have a quick analogy. I used to do and still like to do a little bit of mountain climbing. And when you get to the top and you're at altitude and you've been carrying a pack and you're kind of warm, but I had the worst night I've ever had because I was like, I'm going to take this off, take off these layers. And then all of a sudden I didn't trap any of that heat. And I got so cold that I started to shake uncontrollably. And I learned to be proactive about, in this case, heat management, right? So now it's like you get up there, you think, I feel like I'm a little warm. Well, hey, trap that heat.
Right.
So being mindful of the fact that, you're in a situation where you're going to be tired. And I think it carries over as I'm thinking about it now towards the work environment that we're in. If you're going through a really heavy period, maybe it's like end of quarter, you're shipping some deliverables, whatever it is. It's like, hey, you know what? Knowing that ahead of time, let's go ahead and take some of that mindfulness when it comes to, making sure that we're at our best because we're about to head into a little bit of a danger zone. I really like that idea of being proactive that you're bringing to us.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I would say two things, right? One is you should have your standard, again, physical exercise is an easy one for whether you do it or not. People societally here understand it. That was different than, 25, 30, 40 years ago, right? Or to take it even back 50 years ago, right? People didn't exercise. That wasn't a common thing. People may have played sports or what have you, but it wasn't known that I need to move my body the way we understand it now. And it's the same with mental health. So you should have your daily or weekly practices. And then to your point, if oh, this is the end of the quarter. Oh, I'm an accountant and this is tax season. Hey, we're hiring a bunch of people. Hey, we know we're about to go through layoffs. Like those extra strenuous times, then it's okay. That's often when people slip. That's the time that you actually need to double down, right? To say, okay, it's that much more important that I get a good night's sleep. It's that much more important that I do whatever it is that you're doing to support yourself mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, and I have to confess that there was a time when I was going to the gym in the morning. I love to go to the gym, but I also had taken to listening to like work-related podcasts at the same time. Like I'm getting some level of multitasking out of this. It was terrible. All of a sudden I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of like not really in either place very well. So I finally switched back to listening to almost like mindfulness or meditation, some quiet music tracks, so I could just really focus on that physical movement as a way to take myself offline a little bit. Because it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I know I should be here doing this stuff for my body, but really I'm kind of behind in some stuff, or I really want to learn some stuff. And I was kind of stealing from my what otherwise would have been a healthy practice. I kind of sullied it a little bit, I felt.
I have a slightly different opinion. So if I'm going to the gym because I want to be in really good shape. So the reason I go to the gym now is because I have a 17-month-old and I want to be around for a long time. And that wasn't the case a few years ago because I wanted to look good when I was, single, or before that, I grew up very heavy. Before that, it was, I feel insecure about my body, right? And so the same activity, right, going to the gym and doing cardio or lifting weights, when, I did that exact same thing over different chapters in my life. And at some point it was because I felt insecure. At some point it was because I wanted to impress other people, which also ties to the insecure thing. Now it's a longevity thing for my son and for my wife. And so when I think about like if you're a manager and you're if you're anyone and you're super busy, forget whether you're a manager or not, but you're going to have a lot of things going on. And, maybe you go to the gym and you listen to music because it pumps you up or it lets you relax. Or maybe to your point, like you listen to a podcast because you feel like you're still able to get your growth. So many of us in today's world are juggling so many different things that as much as like multitasking, maybe you could do certain multitasking, but not others. I don't really have an issue if you're like, hey, you know what? I'm doing this thing and I'm getting multiple, kind of it's serving multiple masters, or it's I'm killing two birds with one stone. Actually, I don't think it's bad.
I like it. I like it. And I think you're saying too, is like, we have to find ways of fitting health into our lives and not pretending like, I think that a lot of times I look at people who go up into some mountain retreat and they talk about 10 days of silence. And I'm like, when in the world could you ever find the opportunity to do these things unless it was like super priority? What about for us mere mortals? And it's encouraging to think that, maybe in my way, if I felt like, I do need some time off, maybe it was right for me to listen to music, but for somebody else who's saying, this is a form of multitasking I can do, and it's a good fit, and I'm excited about it. It's all about the intentionality is what I'm hearing from you, which
Yeah,
is
and
so cool.
yeah, I think like I'll use another example. Like if I'm at work and I'm feeling really guilty that I'm not with my son, and then I'm with my son, but when I'm with him, I'm distracted on Slacks and work stuff. Like you're nowhere, right? But if I'm at work and I'm really intentional about it, and I'm doing great work and I'm doing that, and then when I'm with my son, I'm really with him and I'm spending time, like that feels good to me. That feels aligned. And it's not to say you can't do different things, right? Like I might he's young. I might take him for a walk and take a work call because I need to, right? But if that's the entirety of the experience all the time, that's probably not great. And so I think it's also about like being reasonable and understanding with what your life is at that particular moment. And of course, if you want to change it, you can change it, right? If you're only working or you're never working, right? You're only spending time, which feels great, but perhaps you're, not keeping up with your work or you're not supporting your family in a way that you feel you should, then you can reprioritize. But I think given today's world, I think I really like the idea, not of work-life balance, which I think is kind of a trap, but work-life harmony or work-life integration. The idea being like, how do we make these two things fit together in a really nice, harmonious way versus it's this thing where one is always going to be slightly off unless you get it exactly on that right way of balancing.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on that danger zone where we're never really anywhere. So, we're at work and we're thinking about at home, or maybe if we feel guilty that we're working late or something. But then when we get home, we're so exhausted, we're so spent that we don't really there for our family. When we talk about harmony or we find integration, it's how do you make it kind of all work? And it sounds daunting, and it is daunting. But I think with a little bit of, again, I'll use your term, being proactive, thinking about it, making sure that we have the mental health stores and the resilience that we need, I think it's probably much more likely that it can work out okay. And you're talking about a lot of task switching back and forth, which it kind of just takes these days. You're saying, I'm taking my son for a walk, but I'm also going to take a work call somewhere halfway between. Yeah, you're going to go back and forth. This is the stage of life you're in. This is how it works right now.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, we talk about the work environment. It's so important because we spend so much time at work. I mean, arguably, we spend more time at work than we do with our families if you count up all the waking time, unfortunately, at certain seasons of our life. And so some of the listeners who are on right now are thinking, okay, it's great that we're talking about mental health here on this show, but I'm a part of an organization that's a grinder. There's a lot of pressure at work. We don't want to really talk about those things. If you think about somebody who doesn't have this culture of positive leadership when it comes to talking about mental health, making sure we're supporting that, how first of all, if you're a listener and you don't know, you only know your own four walls, what does it look like for organizations that offer a supportive environment when it comes to mental health versus those that don't?
Well, you probably know it because you feel like you can say, hey, I'm struggling. So there's less of a stigma, right? You're creating permission, or permission is there for you to say, like, if I had a broken arm, I wouldn't show up to work and pretend I didn't have a broken arm. Like that would be a weird thing. But if I'm struggling with anxiety, or I had a really bad night's sleep because I'm fighting with my husband or my wife, or I'm worried about, my older parents that I'm taking care of, or what have you, right? Or, your pet's sick and you've been up all night because the pet's throwing up. Like it's a real thing, right? But if you're not safe to say, hey, I don't feel like myself today. Hey, I'm not able to concentrate. I can't focus. That's probably a good indication that the culture isn't as healthy as it could be. A good healthy culture, has less of a stigma. People can talk about mental health. Managers get training so that they know what to look for and how to support others. A lot of companies will have some resources in place, but the problem is they're usually buried deep in the intranet or something like that. And it's not like part of the fabric of the company. You don't have senior leaders talking about it. You don't have managers being vulnerable about telling their stories of, that's the other thing about mental health that we didn't talk about at the beginning. It ebbs and flows, right? Over time. Same with physical health, right? Just to go back to it, because it's so easy. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel really good. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I've had like 2 weeks of eating nonstop pastries and I feel like heavy and lethargic, right? And that can be all of us, right? Or sometimes I'm just physically sick. Um, Same thing with mental health. And so, being at a company, I think going to your earlier point, it's hard to switch jobs. And there's no perfect job, right? There's sometimes a job we might love, sometimes it might be more challenging. But being in an environment that suits you is important. So somebody might be working at a company that's really fantastic when it comes to mental health, but maybe they have a bad boss, right? And they say people don't quit, companies, they quit bosses. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you're at a company where it's not really great when it comes to mental health, but you have an amazingly supportive boss. And so your environment on a day-to-day basis is really good. And so there's a lot of different situations we can end up in. I think a lot of it is, to the serenity prayer of like controlling the things you can control, right? What can you do to take care of yourself? What can you do to support the people around you? Even if you're not a manager, you can still be a leader, right? Just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're a leader, and vice versa. So what are the things you could do to take care of yourself and then take care of others?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think a lot of times about this notion of mental health at work, and you used the term stigma earlier, and it's definitely something that has more of a stigma, I think, in the earlier generations. Like when I was coming up a long time ago, we didn't really talk about mental health at work the same way that we do today. Even when I was in the Marines, we didn't talk about it the same way that they do now. So everything's kind of continuously evolving. And what struck me as really odd, especially now when we think about the most recent generation, I should say, to enter the workforce, they're very comfortable, in my experience, talking about mental health. And so when you look at college students, for example, they talk about anxiety, they talk about medications they're on and dosages. Then they show up to work and we're supposed to pretend like everybody's okay. We don't, like, it's taboo. And you're like, oh, this is not good. So I love that you're highlighting that. I know I'm part of a supportive environment if we can talk about it openly.
Yeah.
If I have managers who are modeling it, who are, it's more than just, yeah, there's a phone number on the back of your, HMO card. Like that's not the sum total of how we should be thinking about mental health at work.
Yeah. And to make it even simpler, like there is no such thing. It is not a physical thing. Like I'm physically holding this thing. That is not the way it is with a culture, right? It's soft and squishy and hard. And what may be a certain way to one person might be the total opposite to the other, right? And so a good judge is just, how do you feel, right? Like, do you feel good? Do you feel supported? Do you feel like you could talk about things openly? That's a very good indication of that. And then really the question is, are you okay with that? Is it, hey, this is not really that important to me. I'm in a good place now, and this job allows me to take care of my family. I have a good time. I'm growing. I'm learning. There's a lot of different reasons why people work. And so it may be that that's just less of a priority. I will say for younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, I guess millennials aren't so young anymore, but, Gen Z, like they're demanding this. They're not, coming out of school. Like when I came out of school, it was, you work 100 hours a week, you sleep under your desk, like suck it up. That was the approach, right? Like people are saying, yeah, I don't want that. I'm not opting into that. So companies and cultures have had to shift because of the very positive changes that younger employees are bringing to the workforce.
Listeners, if you're a millennial, you just learned that you're not that young anymore. Just remember that was Stephen who said that. Not, just send your letters to Stephen. But it's so true. It's so true. I remember, so myself being Gen X, it's been a long time since we were the newest kids on the block, so to speak, but it happens to all of us. And I think the other point is, you go through it. And I think you make such a great point. Sometimes like when I feel like, hey, I'm going pretty good, that doesn't mean that my team is. Yeah. And I might even be going so good that I can absorb some of the challenges that the organization's facing or a big change that we're trying to absorb. But my experience as a leader is only a part of the puzzle. It's what are they going through too? And like you said, things can change in a hurry. All of a sudden it's like, hey, you know what? such and such happened to somebody in my family, and now I'm a caregiver all of a sudden. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we have an environment where you can tell me that. What can we do to help out? Do you need some time? No, you're good. Okay, if that changes, let me know. There's a lot of these things, but I wonder what other tips you might have for us as managers, Stephen, when you think about what are some things we can do to demonstrate that attitude and to really have that proactive mindset when it comes to mental health, just within our team concept. Let's localize it down to, I can only control my team environment for the most part. What are some things I might consider?
Yeah, I mean, I'd make it even smaller. You can only control yourself, and then from there, hopefully have impact on your team. So I'm a big believer of modeling it. So, if I'm like so just to be clear, I work a lot. Like, part of it is I'm the CEO of a company that's fast growing and we're small and you wear many hats. And I don't want every employee to think they have to work 1,000,000 hours in order to fit in a journey. I don't want them to think that if I'm sending emails at midnight that they are expected to do that or respond to them. So constantly communicating expectations, letting them know, like, this is how I work, but you can work different, right? So that modeling it. So that's an example of where I'm not modeling it, but I need to be able to work in the way that works for me. Overly communicating, they say that by the time you're tired, like you're so sick of saying it, that's when people are first hearing it. And I know that to be true because I'm like, I'll announce something and then 2 weeks later, it'll be like, nobody's heard it, right? So it's like, people are busy, they have a million things, so over communicating on things is very important. For me, going back to the first point, like sharing vulnerably, like my challenges, like I talk about, that I'm in therapy. Like, I think everybody should have somebody to talk to, whether that's a therapist, a priest, a rabbi, a best friend. But for me, having that safe space is really helpful. Talking about challenges that I'm having, where I'm saying, I'm struggling with this, or I struggle with this, and this is what I learned. Continuing to develop myself. Like I'm, as we all are, far from a finished product, and continuing to say, hey, like my wife and I are going to this, couples retreat, so we can learn, good, skillful, thoughtful, compassionate communication. Or I'm going and I read this book, or I did this. So trying, and we're all busy, so it's hard to do all the time, and it's hard to do all the things all the time. Hey, I just read this article that really helped me. I saw this podcast. So sharing my story, my challenges, what's worked for me, what hasn't. We have a bunch of things that in place at Journey as a mental health company, things like wisdom money. So the idea being, we want to invest in you and make it easier for you to invest in yourself, not professionally, not, oh, you're going to go to this, conference on what have you. Although we do have a separate budget for that. There's a learning and development budget that you get. But like, what are you doing to make you better, right? Personally, and if it also helps you professionally, great. But how are you investing in yourself? So perhaps as a manager, maybe you have access to some small budget. Maybe it's even a book club, right? Who knows? It could be something as simple as that. But the idea being, you're trying to model it, you're trying to be vulnerable, you're trying to support people. Those are just some of the initial thoughts on that.
I love that there's such a range there too. So some are a little bit bigger than others, but they're all impactful and they all kind of add up, especially over the course of a quarter or a year. You're looking at a lot of different things and really just opening the door for people to be comfortable having the conversation, when they're interested and when they need to have the conversation. I think those are all kind of those micro deposits that really are critical when somebody develops a situation or they're just exposed to prolonged, is what we're seeing now with so much of the challenges today. It's just the uncertainty just continues to pile up in a chronic way for people. And I think being able to call time out and say, can I be honest with you? I'm really going through some stuff right now. Is so even that small act of being comfortable enough to say that to your teammates or to your manager, that's a huge pressure relief valve and a first step toward, that ability to heal and then ideally to thrive, as you said earlier, not just avoiding the negative, but really embracing the positive and getting to that place.
Yep. I agree completely.
I want to get your take on one last thing too, which was toward the end of the book, you had talked about very specific applications within specific industries, and you cared enough to include tips on things like manufacturing and healthcare and retail. What is it that you were seeing that accounted for these, your interest in dedicating some pages to the differences, sort of function by function or industry by industry, I should say?
Yeah, great question. So this is one thing that I've found over the 10 plus years that I've been doing this, is that mental health looks very different in an investment bank or a law firm than it does in a retail environment, than it does in manufacturing. Not that we're not all human beings, of course, but how do you engage a person who's sitting at their desk, with really tight deadlines and timing, where the industry norm is you're working super late hours. Very different than you're on your feet all day physically manufacturing things. You start at a certain time, you punch in, you punch out, you're not at your computer, you don't have access. Also, there are some commonalities in terms of the types of people from a demographic standpoint, from an education standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint in terms of what people are doing. So how are you engaging with somebody who might be in one line of work versus another? And so it's really about like every company is unique. So whether you're talking about 5 companies in the same industry, you know, a Walgreens, a Walmart, you know, a bunch of other retail organizations, those might have some similarities industry wise and yet be very different as individual companies. But there are certain challenges that cover most of them. And so for HR leaders, they're very keen on, you know, they know this, they're aware of this. And we've just picked up a lot of insights on what does work in manufacturing, what does work in healthcare with doctors and nurses who have certain challenges and schedules and things like that, what does work in education. So I thought sharing some of that wisdom, not really for me, but from the folks who are living and breathing it, would be very valuable.
I like that. So we've got a combination of these general principles, but also specific contexts and applications, you know, because things are, you're right, it's very, very different. But to get to the same place, you know, we kind of got to take our different paths to get there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, Steve, I'm going to give us a hard shift to something that I like to do. It's fun. I think it's fun. Usually it's a disaster, but that's kind of what I'm known for. And is to give us a trivia question. Now, you know, you're of an age that when I say I'm talking to Stephen from Journey, people are like, oh, Journey, the rock band. No. So we're going to get a question on the rock band, though, Journey. Let's see. I don't know much of their backstory at all. Let's see how we do here.
Yeah.
Here comes the trivia question. Which iconic Journey song features the lyric, just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit? Is it A, Don't Stop Believing?
A.
B, Separate Ways? He's just sitting right out of the gate.
Hey, it's the only one I'm going to know. It's the only one I'm going to know.
It's the only one. I love that.
We have.
All right, audience. If you're playing along at home, you can lock in your answer. We're going to go with A, which is, let me see here. Let me go back up.
Am I supposed to wait? Am I supposed to wait for everybody?
No, absolutely not. We're plowing forward, and the answer is A, Don't Stop Believing. You crushed it, Stephen. You nailed it. Well done. Hopefully everybody in the audience got that one too. Classic song. But I've got a much better question for you, Stephen. Where can people go to learn more about you, about Journey, and about the book?
Well, I need to tell you one quick story before I answer that question. So we have one HR leader that we've been talking to for a number of years, and she's obsessed with Journey. She's like, Journey got me through high school. She's like, I've seen them 40 times in college. She has like a guitar, autographed guitar in the background. And I always feel like, man, here I am. I named my company Journey, not after the band, but after the fact that, you know, life is about the journey, not the destination. And so every time I talk to her, I'm like, I really need to like study up on this. I really need to come prepared next time. And in 3 years of talking to her, she's amazing. I still have not gotten myself to do that. But if I had gotten that question wrong, that would have been really embarrassing. We would have had to recut this and edit it.
We'd have AI dub it in.
Exactly.
Oh
so to answer your question, we are at journey.live. That's our website, www.journey.live, LIVE. We are on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. It's just, you know, LinkedIn, whatever it is, .com/Stephen Sokoler. I'm pretty easy to find on there. I think we have some other stuff, Instagram, this, that. I don't think we're cool enough to have TikTok, but really LinkedIn, because of the nature of the work we do, mental health, we prefer, and that's why I wrote the book, more long form stuff where, yes, bite size is good, but also giving people more of the nuance, more depth around some of these topics.
I love it. So listeners, I'm going to have those links that Stephen just mentioned in the show notes. I'll also include a link to the book, which is amazing. So Stephen, thanks so much for being on the show, talking all about this critically important topic, giving us really constructive tips that we can use for ourselves and with our teams. I just absolutely loved it.
Thank you. It was great seeing you, Matt. I appreciate this. And for those of you listening, have a great day.